2 or 3 years ago, tutors would go in September, discuss how the training plan was likely to work, and then go back in December to see what they'd found had taken place, but without really having a clear idea, unless you had a proactive mentor or a tutor, as to what was happening in between those 2 days. And the VLE, we felt at that time, in a sort of nebulous kind of way, not very well focused way, would help us to have a better handle on how the trainees were doing and how the mentors felt. We were also mindful that we needed to quality assure what was going on in the schools as a partnership. That there are various drivers from that, including the TDA and Ofsted and our own desires, and just to have a better handle on what was going on. The problem we had was we've got 4 partners. We've got Oxford Brookes University, Oxford University, Oxfordshire County Council and Bucks County Council, all of which had different platforms of their own. So whereas Brookes were using WebCT, I think Oxford University were using Blackboard. So it wasn't going to be easy to find one particular platform that would operate across all the partnerships. One of the problems as well at that point in time, and they may have resolved it now, that the university-based providers had was getting the mentors who aren't members of the university access to the portfolios for the trainees and access to all the materials that the university is providing for its student teachers. The mentors are very often out of that loop. So we looked at getting a bespoke product basically for those reasons. When we set it up, we weren't quite sure what we were going to put inside it, and I think we probably thought we would go further in terms of training materials than we have done. So I think it was sort of very typical teacher model of a didactic, here's the information we're going to provide for you. There is some of that in there. So, for example, we subscribe to teachandlearn.net, which is provided by the Open University, which has a whole range, I think there are 300 units, teacher training units in there, which are subject specific. But by and large, it's kind of like evolved over time. The key concepts that we've been working on are the e-portfolio and the e-mentoring, which I don't think I or anyone else had a clear handle on 3 years ago when we set out.
My background in ICT is actually not very good. I was never really trained in it. I've acquired it. And again, when GTP first began, I was very sceptical of it and didn't really think it was important. It was an extra layer, it was unnecessary. And now it's probably the most important tool for me. Before, as a tutor, you did approximately 5 visits in the year, and in between you heard nothing unless there was a problem. Somebody wanted your support, they'd ring you up and you'd go in. Other than that, you assumed everything was all right. And that's meaningless, really, to anybody who's educating anybody else. And what's happened now is I'm in constant touch, and the importance of the tutor actually is you realise is actually fundamental to supporting even the most experienced mentors in school.
I think first of all, when I first saw the website, I was like, oh, this is a little bit confusing. I'm not entirely sure how to upload it, but I'm sure I'll get used to it. And once you've done it a few times, it's absolutely fine. I think at the very start of the course, there were a few kind of hiccups with the site itself. So I remember at one point it actually managed to log me out of my own my own files, and so that I couldn't access them. So other people could go in and see my work, like Hugh, my tutor, but I couldn't get in and upload any work myself. But that's all sorted out now. So no, once you've done it a few times, it's quite straightforward. And then once you've got them all saved onto your computer, it's really easy to upload. Actually, although I kind of do it religiously now, write my ITP or type my ITP every Friday or Saturday. And then I find it quite a helpful way of looking back at the week and thinking, okay, what have I done, what have I achieved, what have I actually learnt, and how am I going to use it in my teaching as a result.
One of the very neat things is that we ask all the trainees and all the mentors and tutors to upload assessment point materials onto the website, and we can generate reports from that. So they have particular posting boxes that they have to put. This week, for example, it's last Friday was the assessment point 2 deadline. Now, I haven't yet run the reports to see who hasn't posted them yet. I'll probably give them till this Friday. But after that, we'll be able to run a report, identify who hasn't posted their assessment point materials in there, and send them a little email reminder to say, you know, we notice you haven't done that. And before, that used to be done by our administrator, perhaps getting in one sent through the post, perhaps one that had been emailed in, perhaps one faxed in, and marking on a spreadsheet to say that, you know, we'd received the necessary documentation. That doesn't now need to happen because it's all done automatically via the website.
There's a kind of rigour to it now. The trainee has to know where they're going. I mean, so they should, but it's not always has been the case. Now they do. You see where they're going. I will, every time I look at a plan, and I don't look at everybody's training plan every week, that's not my job. But if they email me and say, have a look at this, or I do a sort of probably fortnightly trawl, if I ever look at an ITP, I always write on it. So often it's simply just encouraging, sometimes it's got a question, sometimes it's advice, why don't you read this, and sometimes we get into quite deep communication about, I mean, there's one student recently who simply said, how do I motivate these boys, you know? And I was able to write back and suggest some work and some activities, and ICT actually, as it was. So that's what I would normally do.
It's really important for us to be really rigorous about it, and because there's so much responsibility on the school now in terms of the training programme, for me it's really important that somebody else is kind of looking at her work and making sure that I'm doing the right thing and giving her the right advice. And because it's done via the internet, the feedback is immediate, and I think it works particularly well because the tutor that Jess has is particularly keen and keen to do that on a regular basis. So I suppose it depends on how rigorous your tutor is about looking at the system.
I've just had my AP2, which is when we're sort of assessed by our tutor again for the second time to see and track our progress. And we have to fill out lots of forms for that, so the subject knowledge audit and the ICT audit, and a reflective commentary on sort of all the QTS standards. And I found that really encouraging to actually go through it as I was typing it up and put it on the website, because I felt like, oh wow, I have actually moved forward a lot since the start of the course, and I've learnt so much more. And with ICT as well, I thought, oh yeah, I feel confident, I use that all the time now, whereas at the beginning I hadn't had the opportunity to do that, or just hadn't done it as much as in school. So I definitely see it as a positive thing, and I think it does help you to move forward with your learning, definitely.
In terms of all of us, I think it's the discipline, writing the plans and writing reflective commentaries and putting them on the web. A, it has to be on time, B, it has to be very clear, and C, everybody knows that everybody else can look at it, and therefore the discipline that involves. And I think if 3 or 4 years ago, about mid-year, most trainees, because they're teaching more and more, were beginning not to put up their training plans and getting away with it because you felt sorry for them. Now on the web, that goes on right to the end of the year, right to the ultimate bit, so you've got a complete view of what's going on. But it is a discipline. It's a disciplined route to learning.
I think it's really important for me so that I feel that I'm doing the right thing, and for Jess that she is being checked up on, because it's a training programme and accountability is important, and I think it really helps her to be really reflective about what she's doing.
I'm thinking of some examples of the writing work that we've been doing in Year 5, and just things like so in the ITP, when I'm reflecting on the teaching that's been going on, I've tried to think about the groups of students or the individuals who it's helped the most, and I was really struck as I look back that actually some of the lower ability students in literacy had found the work that we'd done on setting. So we were looking at Little Red Riding Hood originally, but then we did lots of work on what would a forest look like, what would it sound like, and things like that, and how much their work had improved as a result of that input. So then we spent a bit more time on that and tweaking their stories, and didn't rush ahead to the next thing, which you saw us start this morning on play scripts, until we'd kind of rounded off that work. And I then took a small group the following week as a result of that, focusing a bit more on how to improve their writing and move them forward.
What we've embedded in the processes, and we could have done this without the website, is the idea of the reflective practitioner. You know, that what makes good teachers are those teachers who can evaluate, you know, what's been happening in the classroom, look at the strengths, look at the targets for development, and reflect on that and think about ways to go forward. Now, you can do that on paper. But one of the things that the website does, as I just said, is give that discipline to the requirement to do it, knowing that there's somebody who you're not that familiar with, you've only met the tutor once or twice, you know, that person is going to be looking and seeing what you've been putting there. And I think that idea of evaluating and reflecting on practice is a very, very good discipline, you know, and it's embedded throughout the profession these days.
When you're thinking about the learning that's happened in the week, you can really think through the issues that have arisen, or how you can move the children's learning on as a result of the input that you've given or that you've collectively sort of taken part in. So yeah, hopefully I'll be a much more reflective teacher because of it.
It helps us to show the trainees are meeting all the standards as far as assessment is concerned, all well and good, but what we'd like it to do is to be a sort of formative part of, you know, our e-portfolio system is a formative assessment process, rather than first and foremost a means of summative assessment and working out, you know, have they got sufficient evidence to meet the standards, because that's what we think is important. You know, it's not just about having a body of evidence, it's about continuing to reflect on what you're doing. We had concerns that were we going to marginalise the mentors. I mean, you'll have to see what Geeti says and what you say about this later. But I think they've just felt really supported by the tutor being there. Geeti's a new mentor, and so new to the graduate teacher programme, so wasn't quite aware what the expectations would be and whether she was doing it right and so on. And, you know, I would say probably half our mentors this year are in that category. And just by knowing that there is a tutor who's going to be looking at the training plan on a regular basis, I think it helps the mentors to feel far more supported, really.
I really appreciate it. Because in the past I've had PGCE students and the tutors are much more involved, and with the GTP you're almost on your own, because the majority of the training takes place in a school. So for me it's really important that the university is kind of keeping track of what's happening, and it's almost, in a way, if a student isn't maybe as willing to take on the advice, I mean this is not the case with Jess, but if a student isn't as willing to take on advice, then knowing that the tutor's going to be looking at it has, you know, it's likely to have an impact.
It's very mutually supportive. Everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody's in communication with each other, and it provides a lot of sense of direction for the trainee and the mentor. It's not that as a tutor I think I know more than they do, but you are outside the situation and you can probably look at something more objectively. The mentor-trainee relationship is incredibly close, and sometimes it's harder for them to say something that needs to be said than it is for the tutor.
So yesterday, for example, was my AP2, so I was observed by Hugh, and then we had a meeting all together, so with Geethi and with my tutor, and I think that just really helps then to see, for us to work through the paperwork and to check that I'm progressing and doing everything I'm supposed to do for the GTP, and I just build relationships there, so then I feel like they are furthering me in my professional studies, I suppose.
I don't come in blind. I've read it all before. I know exactly what the mentor and the trainee's targets are. I can look at it. When I come in, I observe the lesson, but I can add all that information into a situation which I'm up to date with and understand, rather than coming in blind. There's lots of informal ways of using the ICT, because everything that goes through that system is known by everybody who wants to have a look at it, or you've let in. Sometimes the trainee will email you separately, and sometimes I will email them separately, because it's not something you necessarily want to record. But as a result of that openness and that knowing what's going on, you do have a lot of communication one way or another with the trainee, which you never had before, and with the mentor.
I actually feel like I'm in touch with him all the time, even though I've only seen him, 3 or 4 times so far. Obviously occasionally in university, but he emails me all the time with comments, particularly on my ITP, or if he's found something useful that he thinks I might be interested in to further my subject knowledge and things like that. So I'm probably in touch with you at least once a week, if not more. So I feel like he knows exactly what's going on, and if I have a problem I can just email him and talk to him about it.
So it's kind of like another layer of support. It's a way in which they can communicate with their tutor and also with other trainees, because one of the things we built in with the new website was to enable the trainees to invite in other trainees to be able to share with their portfolio and to read what they're up to and so on.
Karen, who I did a swap with, who's another GTP student, we swapped schools and I went to her school. We've kept in contact a lot, and she has access to my work on the website and I have access to her, so I can read what she's done and sort of see whether it's in line vaguely with what I've been doing as well. So in that way it's useful.
The phrase is communities of practice, that basically where learners put together their own sort of support networks, and you can have formalised networks of this is your tutor, this is your mentor, but we don't just learn like that. We learn by bouncing ideas off one another. And so what we try to do, and it's based on social networking really, is say, if you want people to be able to see your portfolio, then you can invite them in to have that kind of access. We haven't got online application forms at the moment. We don't generate, so all the databases of who's applied, which school they've applied with, what gender they are, their age range, their ethnicity, all that kind of stuff we're inputting manually. And so our next stage forward, hopefully next year, if the TDA give us some more money in particular, would be to get all that collated automatically, which would be a huge save as far as administration is concerned.
Because I have uploaded some photos to the website, but it wouldn't allow me to insert the photo into my actual ITP, which is my individual training plan. So I had to attach about 6 photos to one page and upload it that way. So I think that would be really useful, because I've taken lots of photos, and I have used my camera to take a short video of the children when we were doing some dancing and some gymnastics in the hall, and they were really brilliant. It's difficult to put those up on the website at the moment because they doesn't seem to like it when I try. So that would be good. Yeah. We've deliberately gone away from the idea of a blog because we want it to be focused in terms of what they've learnt.
I was trained in the late 60s, where I thought we were really badly trained, but we were superb practitioners because we were creative and interesting, and the child was the centre, and that's what should be happening in primary. And I feel genuinely that something has slid very badly, particularly in the last 10, 15 years, and that I love seeing the creativity now that's beginning to be encouraged again by everybody, and developing that through again. It's very different to what we used to do in the 60s and 70s, but it still needs to be nurtured, and because the arts are given such little time because of the way the national curriculum is set up, then to see trainees finding their way of still bringing that creativity through is very important.